Hey guys, welcome back to RustPromoter. I just finished up James Bond month. Hopefully if you're a fan of the franchise, you were able to celebrate as well. I was super excited to see that IO Interactive announced a new James Bond game. It's been about 8 years since the last one, so hopefully with their talent, they'll be able to do a lot of unique things with the James Bond franchise, so I'm excited to see what they do. Last episode, we looked at the third-person shooter based on Pierce Brosnan's second Bond film, Tomorrow Never Dies. If you haven't had a chance to watch this yet, click on the tab below to see my review and see just how different the game was in comparison to the smash hit GoldenEye. But today, we are now moving on to the next game in this series, The World Is Not Enough. Now there are 3 drastically different versions of this game, one for the Nintendo 64, one for the PlayStation 1, and finally one for the Game Boy Color. Today I will only be reviewing the N64 and PS1 copies of this game, and maybe in the future I will look into doing another video on the Game Boy Color version. Initially I had planned only to do the 64 version, but while researching the differences between the two games, I found out just how different the PlayStation 1 version was. The two games were developed from the ground up by 2 separate companies, the Nintendo 64 version being developed by Eurocom, and the PlayStation version being made by Black Ops Entertainment, the guys who just finished up the development of Tomorrow Never Dies. Both companies took different approaches to returning Bond to the first-person shooter genre, attempting to utilize the different strengths of the corresponding systems. Both games follow the events of the movie, so you can see a lot of overlap between the level titles, location, and objectives, but ultimately that will be where the similarities end. These are 2 widely different games, so let's break them down one at a time, starting with the Nintendo 64 version. Let's start out by looking at some of the visuals. Quick note here, all the footage from the N64 version of the game was captured using the expansion pack, which if you don't know, helps push the graphical capabilities of the system.
Your safety deposit box is ready for you in the privacy booth.
Although the game's textures looked pretty basic by today's standards, I was really impressed with how well the graphics held up, and it looks like the developers really pushed what the 64 could do. The animations look super nice, especially in regards to the game's reloading animations and particle effects. The frame rate is silky smooth and never really slows down except for a couple parts where the game gets a bit chaotic. The lighting is also really well done, adding a nice ambiance to the levels which show up more notably in some of the nighttime missions. In terms of level design, the levels are very open and large in scale, allowing the player to explore and seek out their own route to completing objectives. The objectives are more dynamic than past games, dropping new ones on you as you play. The diversity of the levels and their objectives really kept the game feeling fresh. One moment you're trying to disarm a bomb in the subway, the next you're skiing down snow slopes trying to blow up Parahawks in like a pseudo on-rails shooter section. These moments make the game feel so cinematic, even more so than most modern licensed games. One of the most notable missions is called Night Watch, where you have to sneak around the mansion grounds to bug phones and gather evidence, all while trying to avoid getting caught. It's a very stealth-centric section that I had a lot of fun with. I was also very impressed with the sheer amount of weapons and gadgets you can get in the game, somewhere in the ballpark of 40 or so. Several of the gadgets are one-off uses just to complete a certain objective, but the coolest gadget you can get is your watch, which you can use at any point in the game. This gadget has different modes such as laser, stunner, tranq darts, and grappling hook, all of which can be utilized quite effectively throughout a lot of the missions, without them directly telling you when and where to use it. When it comes to controls, those of you who can pick up a controller and still slay it at GoldenEye today will feel right at home, where it feels almost exactly identical to the original control scheme. For others though, myself included, it was really difficult to be accurate in the game, especially if you choose not to use the auto aim function. While I thought the controls were a bit cumbersome, especially when trying to use the manual aim reticle, there were a lot of options to change them up to suit your style and ultimately worked well after enough game time. Replayability in this game is quite nice, with the Agent, Secret Agent, and Double O Agent difficulties to go through, each actually changing up enemy amounts and locations instead of just turning up the damage. The most notable feature in the 64 version that is absent in the PlayStation version is the inclusion of the multiplayer, which is filled with tons of different modes, levels, and characters, a lot of which are from other classic Bond films. This is also the first Bond game to include AI bots to fill out the match when you don't have a full 4 players to play with. And while the AI aren't the best, it's still nice to have that feature to make things more interesting if you're just playing with someone else. There are also a wide variety of modes, from classics like Capture the Flag and Man with a Golden Gun, and several new variants. For example, Uplink is one where you have to search the map looking for 3 satellites. Once your team captures them, your points will start to go up, and whoever has the most points at the end of the match wins.
I hope you know what you're doing, 007.
Overall, I adore the 64 version of The World Is Not Enough, and I honestly believe it is a very underrated game, not only in terms of a Bond game, but also a very fun first-person shooter. The missions are just overall so enjoyable, and the multiplayer just expands on what makes GoldenEye so much fun. So it's something I feel like people should mix it up and try some of the more unique modes in The World Is Not Enough. I can't recommend this game enough. Now let's move on to the PlayStation version. Thanks to the PlayStation hardware, they were able to inject more moviness into the game by doing things like adding full voice work to the mission briefing section instead of the 64 version where they only did text. And the biggest addition is the use of actual footage from the movie in place of the cutscenes, which I thought was really nice. In terms of visuals, the PS1 version has a better resolution and a lot more detailed textures, which you can notice quite a bit in the environments and weapons. Overall, I felt like this made the visuals pop a little more than the 64, though the downside to this is that I don't feel like as much effort was put into the animations. Enemies seem more stiff, explosions look flat, and the reload animations look rather simple. The level design is a much more straight-line shooter in comparison to the 64 version. Most of the levels are much more linear, with you running and gunning quickly through them with very little reason to stop. There are a few levels, especially towards the end of the game, where they open up a bit and give you a little more room to explore, but they definitely are on a lot smaller scale. The developers cut out a total of 5 missions from the 64 version, but they did add a pretty cool casino mission that involves you having to play blackjack in order to bribe a contact for information. This level shows off some of the more ambient moments in the game, which I really enjoyed, and just having a little break from shooting was appreciated.
Well played, Mr. Bond.
The biggest advantage of the PS1 version comes down to its control scheme. While the version still only uses a single analog stick, aiming and moving can be done much quicker and much more accurately, even without the use of auto-aim. Being able to pick up a sniper, zoom in, and take out a distant target without taking damage felt incredibly good after not feeling like I could pull this off in the N64 version. More modern gamers will probably attune better to the PS1 controls overall. With a runtime of over 4.5 hours and only 2 difficulty levels to choose from, there unfortunately is not a lot of replayability, and it's sad to see that there is no sort of multiplayer support for the PlayStation version. It looks like the developers had initially planned to add multiplayer, but ultimately decided to focus their efforts more on the single player experience, which is kind of a huge bummer. It would be easy to write off the PlayStation version of The World Is Not Enough as just a watered-down copy of the 64 game, but honestly, I still enjoyed it quite a bit. It is a very straightforward shooter with not a lot of bells and whistles, more in line with the original PlayStation entries of Medal of Honor. I've talked to several people though who actually prefer this version because of how well it controls and how much more in line with the movie it is. Regardless of the version you want to check out, let's see how much each version will set you back. Here is the 64 version complete in box, which looks to be running a little over $30. The original blue cartridge, as you can see here, has the little Blockbuster sticker on it, which doesn't add any value, but the blue cartridge itself runs about $15 to $20 currently. There is also a gray cartridge that seems to be running a little less, under 15 bucks. The PlayStation version has standard and greatest hits copies, both of which seem to be under $10. I bought mine online for this review for $6, so you'll be able to pick this up super cheap if you want to give it a try. I want to thank the game store Retro Rocket for loaning me this complete N64 copy of The World Is Not Enough for my review. Be sure to click on the link in the description to see what stuff they have going on at their shop. Thank you for drinking martinis and shooting bad guys with me this month here on RustPromoter. If you liked the video, please hit the thumbs up button, and if you would like to be notified when the next video drops, please hit subscribe. Thank you for watching. Take care.